Are you a South African musician trying to figure out the difference between SAMRO, SAMPRA, Capasso and RISA? Welcome to this episode where I plan on demystifying just that. Parts of this video are sections that I've taken from my mini course titled Understanding Music Publishing. So if you want a more detailed and a thorough explanation between the differences and how this matches up with you as a musician, head over to the link in my comments to get the course. It's only 100 Rand and I'd really appreciate the support. Now, going back to the topic of this video, we have to understand how music copyright kind of works in order to differentiate and explain the difference between the four companies. First of all, SAMRO, Capasso and SAMPRA collectively are called CMOs, collective management organizations. So sometimes I'll be using the term CMOs. So be sure to make sure that you remember CMOs is talking about those three organizations. Now, understanding copyright, we have to make a basic example to understand how things work. So you know the song Hallelujah. Mozart wrote it back in the day when we had no record labels, etc. He sat down with a piece of paper and he wrote down Hallelujah. Okay, now this that he wrote down is the composition. It consists of notes and some lyrics or words. So that is the composition of the song. Once Mozart had finished writing out the song Hallelujah, he then got a publisher to take that composition and give it to several entities to play this composition. So he'd say, for example, he'd give it to me Skill, I'll take the composition and I'd make a piano version of Hallelujah and I'd sing it myself. Then a brass band would take the same composition Hallelujah and make a different Hallelujah. So now there are two versions of that Hallelujah. Let's make a third example where a choir takes that with an orchestra, they take Hallelujah and they go and record this song called Hallelujah. Now we got three versions of Hallelujah. Me, myself, and the other two entities have recorded the composition. So we made a sound recording of the composition called Hallelujah. So basically in a song, there's the composition half and there's a sound recording half. The reason they did this is because very often you have multiple sound recordings to one composition. So the Hallelujah example in this case. Now, since we have multiple variations of sound recordings and one composition, the music industry decided, instead of having one body figuring out all of this, let's have multiple bodies that can focus on just the composition side of things and just the sound recording side of things. So on the composition side of things is SAMRO. First of all, SAMRO is the South African Music Rights Organization, and they deal typically with composers, authors, which are also writers, and publishers or entities that own rights in composition half of a song, in the composition half of a song. So SAMRO deals with the performance royalties from the composition side of things. And then comes in Capasso. Capasso is also on the composition side of things, and they deal with the mechanical royalties to do with that. I have separate videos which detail more about SAMRO and Capasso, or you can get my mini course where I spend a little more time differentiating the difference between the type of royalties that these collect. So the difference between SAMRO and Capasso is that SAMRO deals with performance royalties and Capasso deals with mechanical royalties. But there's one similarity, is they deal with the composition side of things. So that is where SAMRO and Capasso fit in. Now let's move to the sound recording side of things. As I said before, you remember I took the Hallelujah song, so I don't own the composition of Hallelujah. I just recorded the song and I made a sound recording, so I own the sound recording of the song. So in order for me to collect royalties from there, I have to deal with the entities in this side too. So I signed up with SAMPRA. SAMPRA deals with the sound recording of the compositions. So typically they are referred to as needle time rights, and in other countries they call these neighboring rights. So SAMPRA has to do with the needle time rights to do with the sound recordings. So what's the difference between SAMPRA and SAMRO? SAMRO has to do with performance royalties and deals with the composition side of things, and SAMPRA has to do with the needle time royalties and has to do primarily with the sound recordings. What's the difference between Capasso and SAMPRA? Capasso has to do with mechanical royalties, which are linked to the composition half of a song, where SAMPRA does not do anything with the composition but works with the sound recording and the needle time royalties to do with a sound recording. So those are the three CMOs. So how does RISA fit in all of this? RISA is basically similar to an association or trade union or simply a union for typically record labels and musicians that are working with recordings. So it's somewhat kind of a union basically. And they typically are administering ISRC codes, which are codes that are like ID numbers for the sound recording half of a song. So remember my example where I had 3 versions of Hallelujah. I would have my own ISRC for my Hallelujah. Another person would have their own ISRC for the sound recording, and then the choir would also have an ISRC for their version of Hallelujah. So each song has its own ISRC, and in South Africa, RISA is mandated to give you your ISRC code. So that is how RISA fits in. They also give awards and have charts, etc. But that's not the main focus of this video. It's basically to differentiate that you have to understand that each song has a composition half and a sound recording half. If you don't get clarity on those two things, you will always struggle with the difference between those 3 CMOs. But don't be afraid to head over to the link in my comments and description to get my mini course titled Understanding Music Publishing in South Africa, because I clearly explain how these CMOs go in, and I have better graphics, and I slowly bring it through to how you get to registering, why you should register, what they actually do, and then right at the end I tell you how to go about using these CMOs to the best to try and earn royalties from these different CMOs. I've got separate videos for those 3 with regards to SAMRO, Capasso, and SAMPRA, and I have some content on RISA. There's a playlist to do with that. But to keep on getting information linked to similar topics such as this one, head to the comments and sign up to my mailing list where I send weekly information and keep you up to date with regards to the music industry in South Africa.